Derek Newby, born in 1924, has had a life full of experiences, ranging from joining the RAF aged 18 to becoming the president of the English Bowls Association in 1994. Derek has many fascinating stories to be told, and over the last few years has been documenting his knowledge and experiences into 3 self-authored books. I have been giving exclusive access into Derek's house to have a chat about his life. This is Life and Times, Derek Newby.
My name is Derek Newby, and I was born in Halesworth, Suffolk, in 1924. I attended school there until I was 14, when I left to work in Halesworth for the largest firm, retail and wholesale grocers, undertakers, drapers and furnishers. And I was told that my job would be to learn the furnishing trade, which I was hoping I would do. My hours were 56 hours a week for 10 shillings a week.
That's not a lot, is it?
No, it's not. It was a lot then, because other boys who went as apprentices to the building trade and other jobs, they served apprenticeships, but they were only received half that amount.
What's that equivalent to in today's money for a week's work?
Well, it was £0.50, so it's 50 pence.
Wow.
But this cannot be compared, really. And I had to give them 9 shillings a week of that to my mother to keep me.
So you were only left with 1?
I was left with a shilling, which was 12 pence. And I could squander that over the weekend. So by Monday morning I didn't have any money or any other pocket money.
A big part of your life was then the RAF. After volunteering for what was referenced to as the Halesworth Dad's Army, Derek was called up to the RAF just 4 days after his 18th birthday.
I was 18 in 1942, and they called me up 4 days later after my 18th birthday. So when I joined the Air Force, I was 18 and 4 days.
That's quite young.
Well, considering you're not 20,
yeah,
it gives you a little idea. At that time, I knew I'd never been to London. I'd got to report to Cardigan. They sent me a travel warrant to Cardigan. But I had heard of somebody else who was going the same day. He was a farmer from All Saints. His father was a farmer. And we travelled together to London, which was my first time I'd been to London. And we were met there by this man's sister, who gave us a good roast lunch and put us on the train to Cardington in Bedfordshire, which was the reception area for new recruits. Here we were kitted out with the uniform and given a mug and a knife, fork and spoon, which stayed with us for the rest of our time in the service.
After a few days of being there, Derek was called to an interview to discuss what he wanted to do. Derek wanted to be a wireless operator air gunner or something similar.
But their response was they didn't take people for aircrew who wore glasses. So they then discussed it, and it was decided that I should become an instrument repairer.
Right. So do you think getting rejected because of your glasses saved your life in hindsight?
I would say 95% yes, because we were losing aircrew every night. I had heard on the radio, on my father and mother's old battery operated radio, that how many planes went out and how many returned. each morning on the 8 o'clock news.
After a few weeks, Derek was sent to Wiltshire for a 3-month training course on the aircraft instruments. Once he'd completed this course, Derek was sent to India.
When I was on my final day at home, on my embarkation leave, I met my father from work in the evening, and we were walking through a deserted Halesworth, and he was saying, he said to me, when you get out there, you'll think yourself lucky you were born an Englishman. And he said, and when you do, stay away from strong drink and the native women. And those words I remembered I had to think about during my time in India.
Yeah.
But my first night in India, we were put in this large hall, and the crickets, which I think are a form of grasshopper, chirped away all night. We didn't get a wink of sleep. Crickets, and this was my first night in India.
Right.
I was then sent to Pune, which was part of, it was a home of Indian generals and people. There was an airfield there. There was also a prison there.
Right.
And the prison wasn't too far from our camp, which was an airfield, of course.
Yeah.
And it was there that I became acquainted with Gandhi, I should say, of the position in India regarding Gandhi.
Yeah.
Mahatma Gandhi was a rebellious gentleman who believed in the British, who dominated them, and he was a civil disobedient champion. Every night, masses of people gathered outside this prison and got on their hands and knees and, "Oh, Gandhi," and this went on from these people all night long.
Yeah.
Could have been 500,000 of them. They were there, same every night. There was a sort of a gathering there for them to worship their man Gandhi.
During his time in the RAF, Derek was posted to many different parts of India, one of which being a place called Salboni, which he later named his bungalow where he settled in Wenniston.
Anyhow, I arrived at Salbani, where we were told we were taking a delivery of new Liberator bombers.
Right.
And there was about 15 or 16 instrument repairers.
Yeah.
Our job was to service these new Liberators and prepare them for active service against the Japanese. And to do this, we had to take them, or they had to go on what was called endurance tests.
Yeah.
And that meant long journeys over the sea. Anyhow, I went on a lot of these long flights for something to do, really.
Yeah.
And we'd be up there 5 or 6 hours out over the sea and eventually come back.
Yeah.
And but we didn't have any accidents at all.
Yeah. After some time in Salboni, Derek was then posted to Secunderabad.
And when I got to Secunderabad, we were put on this Nizam's private airport. But he had an airport building, which all airports needed, and he had 2 hangars, which we were able to work in. We had Tiger Moth aircraft, and we were training Indian youths to become pilots and fly. And we had the necessary equipment there, and the airfield was a huge expanse of grassland, and we eventually got permission to put a football pitch in one corner of it. I found that when I first got there, I was the only instrument repairer there. But the chief engineer, the Nizam's chief engineer, and another one were married to white ladies. These gentlemen were surprised to find that instrument repairers didn't actually repair instruments.
Right.
But they simply replaced those that were US with new ones. But anyhow, I did this, and I didn't have to replace many instruments, but I did have to sign the form every morning to say that I'd inspected the instruments.
Yeah.
And checked the altimeter arrangements, which consisted of blowing up a tube in the main plane and having somebody in the cockpit to make sure. Here again, I did quite a lot of flying, because we had 7 or 8 instructor pilots, mainly commissioned, or 1 or 2 flight sergeants who were pilots, and they were instructing these young Indian men to fly, to become pilots. The consequence of this was that I'm working with these other chaps. We were quite a tight little unit, about 40 or 50 of us, engine fitters, aircraft fitters, instrument repairers, 2 electricians, and a couple of carpenters.
Yeah.
All based in the workshop, which is something that a lot of people service people didn't have. They didn't have a hangar to work in.
Yeah.
So we were very lucky in that way. Our living quarters were about 200 or 300 yards away in a settlement of basher straw huts and what we called the bashers.
Yeah.
And I became friends with a carpenter who was also a very good pianist and organist.
Right.
And he befriended me. He was an only child, and he came from the Midlands. Working alongside me in my little workshop was an electrician, and he was called Raymond Cave, and he and Aubrey, the carpenter, and I struck up a close friendship as they lived together. They lived quite close to one another.
Yeah.
In the Midlands, and spoke with this Brummie accent. So Aubrey, he wouldn't swear. He'd call everything rotten. Where other people would be using the F word, he'd say rotten. He was, and they didn't take the mickey out of him, but because he was so clever, entertaining them musically, he'd go into the canteen in the evenings where they had a piano, and they'd have sing-songs and all the rest of it. So he was quite popular.
Derek, Aubrey and Ray struck up a close friendship, and they were able to share holidays together during their time in service. They visited many lovely sites, including the Taj Mahal. On one of the adventures, the three boys went on a riding trip.
And we went on this riding picnic, and we got on these ponies, and they walked and walked, and then after about half an hour they broke into a gallop.
Yeah.
Well, I'd never ridden on, but that was the most exhilarating thing I ever happened to me, I think.
Yeah.
Because that was marvellous. Anyhow, we got to this place where we were having this picnic, and we had tea and sandwiches, and we tethered the horses, and eventually that was time to leave. We then turned for home, and we walked, cantered or trotted for the first half a mile or so, and suddenly they broke into a gallop. And these horses knew the way home, you see.
Yeah.
But I didn't. And I got left behind because that horse tossed me over its head.
Right.
It went round a bend wrong, and that knew what the way and where the places were that I could get thrown.
Did it do you any damage?
No, incredibly not. Every 300 or 400 yards, that horse had me off 7 or 8 times, and I was alone. And I clung on to the reins. Had I just let that rein go, I would have lost that horse, and I would have been lost on that mountain. Mind you, they had to come back to look for me, I expect.
Yeah.
But I held on.
When they were back in Secundrabad, they were in their hangar one afternoon when the news they were all waiting for came through.
We were in the hangar one afternoon in the August, and somebody came in and said, the war's over. We're all going home. So I said, we said, what's happened then? Well, what had happened, of course, was the Americans had dropped these atomic bombs on 2 or 3 Japanese cities.
Yeah.
And they were so powerful they wiped whole cities out. Of course, the Japanese emperor, they got no answer to it. So the Japanese emperor gave instructions to the Japanese to down arms.
Right.
So that was a terrific relief for the Western countries, in in Europe and us in America.
Yeah.
To think that we wouldn't get any more killed.
Yeah.
Although the war was over, Derek still had another year left in service. This was because he was a single man. During that final year, Derek was sent to Sumatra via a transit camp in Madras. They were sent to Sumatra to hand it back to the Dutch.
But I'd then done 2 years, and they said that single men would have to complete their tour unless they could prove that they were doing, they could get out under Class B, which was for essential workers.
Yeah.
And I wasn't an essential worker, so I got to do my final year
Right.
out there. And to do that, I'd got to go to Sumatra.
Right.
Well, that was, Sumatra was an island south or with Singapore out that way.
Yeah.
Sumatra and Java and Bali and these places. And so I got to do that. I was posted, along with some others, we got to go to Sumatra. So we went again to a transit camp, this time in Madras, a place called Red Hills Lakes.
Yeah.
And we had Sunderland flying boats there, and there was an airfield as well, but little for us to do. So we had to work in the cookhouse or do what was, and we had every afternoon off. We were waiting for the ship
Yeah.
to take us to Sumatra. And this went on over Christmas of 1945. One notable thing was, and then New Year's Eve, 1945, Curly Pratt and I, Curly was an electrician, we were walking the streets of Madras. We'd been to swimming in the afternoon, had egg and chips or whatever, and we came to a hotel where there was a dance on. But they were all in black ties and ladies in long dresses and so on. And no chance had we got ever getting in there. But after the war, it transpired that I had a cousin in the Wrens who was an officer in the Wrens. That was the women's branch of the Navy.
Yeah.
And she happened to be in that hotel that night, but I didn't know. If I had known, I would have gone in and tapped her up for a few rupees. But that wasn't to be, but that's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
I'll always remember that. Looking in there was something you couldn't do yourself.
Yeah.
It was like looking in a toy shop when you're small, looking at toys your parents couldn't afford to buy.
Yeah.
But anyhow, eventually we got on this ship to Sumatra. When we got to Sumatra, we were told that we were sent there to hand it back to the Dutch, as it was originally known as the Dutch East Indies. They'd colonised these islands and made a good job of it. They had their own townships and all that. But when the Japanese occupied them, they rounded all the able-bodied men up and shipped them across to build a new railway between Burma and Malaya, I think, that railway. And that resulted in many of these men dying, who were sent there to Burma, many of these men dying, and their widows and their women folk who were left behind when they went were put into internment camps and kept fed by the Japanese. But when we got there, we were supposed to hand it back to the Dutch. But the local people, under the direction and influence of a man named Sukarno, had other ideas, and they didn't want the Europeans back.
Yeah.
The Dutch, really. So the Japanese soldiers were no trouble. They were prepared to be rounded up. They'd had enough warfare. They didn't want to get themselves killed.
Yeah.
But we had to go everywhere armed because we didn't know which of the locals was friendly and wanted them back and which were against it.
Yeah.
And that was the first instance, really, of terrorism as we know it today.
Yeah.
You don't know who your enemy is, and we didn't know then.
Yeah.
So we went about armed. What had happened to the women was they'd been released from the internment camps and sent back to their houses that they'd had before the invasion of the Japanese. They made us very, very welcome.
Yeah.
Because they were having luxuries like chocolate and cigarettes and drinks and things. that we were taken in that they hadn't seen for years, or the years that they'd been occupied. And it wasn't long before we got friendly with some Dutch people, and had quite a nice time with them because they got facilities that they'd put in there in the way of dance halls and restaurants and that sort of thing, which were gradually getting reopened.
Yeah.
But that was very difficult for them, and our brief was to ship them back to Europe, which was what we did. And I got friendly with a Dutch widow with 2 children, and they gave me a party because my papers had come through.
In the June of 1946, Derrick's papers had finally come through. Derrick could head home.
My papers had come through for be repatriated to the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Well, they gave me this party and I stayed out all night. When I went back to camp, there was a sergeant on the gate. He said, "Hello, where have you been?" I said, "Oh, I'm going to be repatriated. They gave me a farewell party down there." "Well, I didn't know you were off the camp," he said. "You ought to be more careful." He said, we lost part of the guard during the night up on the airfield. He said the terrorists came along and cut the guard. Was the RAF regiment, and these terrorists, they were doing 2 on and 2 hours on, 4 off.
Yeah.
You see, and those that were off were getting the head down, and they attacked them in the beds.
It was kind of lucky that you were away from camp.
Yeah, but this was on the edge of the airfield, not where we were living, but where, on the edge, up on the airfields, where the RAF regiment were guarding and protecting us.
So did you keep in touch with your friends you'd made, like Ray and Aubrey? Did you keep in touch with them?
I did. I went to be Aubrey's best man the year after. Yes, well, eventually I got put on a plane to Singapore, and from there I was in a transit camp, and then eventually I was shipped with 8,000 other men from other services as well as the RAF. We boarded a Mauritania in Singapore, and we left there and we came home and docked at Liverpool after 17 days. I met up, I felt awful. I was met off the train at Aylesworth by my father and mother, who'd been to church that Sunday evening, and they came and met me off the train. And after London and everywhere I'd been, Aylesworth seemed like a tiny miniature little village. And so I spent the next 2 or 3 weeks at home in Aylesworth before I had to report back to the RAF at RAF Leaming.
Right.
Because I hadn't been discharged.
Yeah.
And in fact, this is now August, but in fact I didn't get discharged until January the next year,
Wow.
New Year. I was discharged from the Air Force with a pork pie hat and a grey pinstripe striped suit, like the rest of them, £50 gratuity. First thing I did was bought a new bicycle for £5.
Once Derrick had left the RAF, he went into a normal job.
My first job was in the office of a large firm of building contractors. I was employed as a clerk, and this lasted 6 years before I was made redundant. During my time with this firm, I was married in 1950 to a nursing sister at the Patrickstead Hospital who had come here as a midwife, and we were allocated one of the new houses on Beddingfield Crescent, and we were the 13th occupants on the whole of the Brumfield and Walpole Road estates in the house. During this time, we were playing tennis we both joined a tennis club, or rather I joined the tennis club and she came to the hospital.
Right.
And we were allocated this house.
At this time, Derrick's brother Donald was a candidate for the Liberals. Donald asked Derrick to get involved. Derrick helped out his brother by running a weekly tote competition. During this time, Derrick was also getting stuck into property.
In 1960, my brother was offered a candidature of the Liberal, to be the Liberal candidate in the I constituency.
Right.
And he'd bought a house in Holton, he'd bought a large house in Holton, which was too big for him, and he offered me the end part of more or less the servants' quarters.
Right.
This was a sort of poor man's stately home with a large garden and land, and so I bought the servants' quarters, and converted them to a 4-bedroomed house, which only meant the conversion actually consists of blocking up a door on the ground floor and the first floor.
Yeah.
He then asked me if I would form a weekly tote competition, similar to those being run by the Labour Party.
Right.
And I agreed to do this. And after canvassing around the constituency, I started this weekly tote competition and had appointed a lot of weekly collectors, or collectors who collected every week and submitted the money. I had an office in my house.
Right.
And a young lady assistant. And this job took me across the I constituency. It involved a lot of travelling every week, but it brought me into contact with a lot of interesting people.
Yeah.
One of whom asked me to go into partnership with him on the purchase of a cottage.
Right.
Out in the Stradbroke area. And this we did, and did it up part-time. We didn't do much to it. We cleaned it up and sold it at quite a nice profit.
Yeah.
And during this time, I continued to play tennis, and I played football for Halesworth as a goalkeeper, but had the misfortune to break my arm.
Right.
And that finished football for me.
What, for good?
For good. But I continued playing tennis. And in 1958, I took a coach's course, which involved 6 evening visits to Ipswich, and obtained my coaching certificate before the commencement of the season.
Yeah.
The tote competition flourished, But my brother didn't stand much of a chance in the election in 1964 because the sitting member was a strong Conservative. Was a Conservative with a very large majority.
Right.
And there was also a very active Labour cause in the constituency. But my brother did double the original Liberal vote
Yeah.
at the previous election. But I continued in partnership with the other gentlemen buying and selling food cottages. And eventually he became ill after he had persuaded me to invest in a boutique in Housemouth, which his wife would run.
Right.
But after a very short time, he had a stroke, and his wife couldn't come in from Stradbroke every day, so I was left with a boutique to run.
Yeah.
But I was very fortunate, as I employed some young ladies who had worked in the rag trade, other shops, and they ran it for a time.
Yeah.
Before one of them bought it.
Right.
Bought it from me. I ran the Liberal tote until 1989 and combined it with property dealing and other enterprises.
In 1969, Derek was travelling home through a terrible storm. When he got home, his wife was waiting for him in complete darkness.
It was during this time, at the time of the first landing on the moon, when I was driving home one evening, and there was a tremendous flash of lightning and loud bang when I was in Bungay Road, a couple of minutes from home. When I got home, my wife met me at the door and the house was in darkness. And she said, I think our lights have gone out. I think and there's a lot of dust, she said. I don't know what happened. So, to cut a long story short, we had been struck by lightning.
Yeah.
By what was called a thunderbolt.
Right.
For her, it was a pretty horrific event because she could have been damaged, could have been harmed.
Yeah.
Because a lot of furniture in the house, upstairs and downstairs, was ruined. It was a terrific, the thunderbolt as a shaft of lightning.
Yeah.
That goes to earth, fire anything in its path. And it causes moisture in the wood.
Yeah.
To evaporate and expand, and bricks and things get disintegrate, and the same with anything, any wood that's in the way, any moisture in that wood, it gets transformed into steam and expands and causes the damage. So we managed to stay, we couldn't sleep upstairs. So we managed to convert the ground floor to a sort of semi-bungalow.
Yeah.
And we lived like that for a few weeks till the house was restored.
In 1970, Derek bought what later became Hooker House.
In 1970, my partnership had been dissolved with the gentleman. But number 15 Key Street, which was known as Brewery House, and the owner of which also owned maltings in Halesworth.
Yeah.
The house had been neglected because the maltings had run down and everything had become derelict. And this large house was on the market, and I was seeking office accommodation to take my activities out of my house in Holton.
Yeah.
And I had continued to play tennis for Halesworth, and I was active in the committee. I was secretary, I was chairman, I was everything in the tennis club except treasurer, which I wouldn't do.
Yeah.
I never, one job I wouldn't take.
Yeah.
And I had a large number of children through my hands during the 1970s, 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
The house in Key Street that I've mentioned had over 20 rooms.
Right.
At the time, there was no relief road from Halesworth through around Halesworth, and all traffic from the south and west that wanted to go east came through Halesworth.
Right.
And went through Halesworth thoroughfare.
Yeah.
There were not many cars on the road after the war, but these gradually increased, as did the lorries.
Yeah.
The railways were being used less and less, and more road goods were coming by road, and more and more people were getting cars. And so, for a long time it was realised that Halesworth would have to be bypassed.
Yeah.
Because all traffic coming from the south, off the A12,
Yeah.
through Bramfield and all that, all had to go through the town.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that linked up with traffic from Halston,
Yeah.
which all went through Halesworth thoroughfare. And, of course, there was lots and lots of congestion.
Yeah.
Because there was still parking outside the shop. If you went shopping, you parked outside the shop.
Yeah.
And but the route for the new road, for the relief road, had not been determined. Various suggestions had been made. To cut a long story short, they needed to demolish Hooker 15 Key Street,
Yeah.
or it was suggested that this be demolished. But it had a history, as it was the home of Sir Joseph Hooker, who was born there, and his father had moved there, and both these gentlemen were botanists, very keen botanists, who were instrumental in the formation of Kew Gardens.
Yeah.
And both were eventually knighted, and the house was deemed to be an ancient monument and one worth preserving. And the idea that it might be demolished brought forth protests from a number of people.
Yeah.
And so it was decided to compromise and reduce it in size.
Right.
And this was decided by the county council. I had bought the house, I had established my office there, and my brother was hiring rooms off me for his business.
Yeah.
And then this idea that it be demolished brought forth so many protests that the matter was raised in the House of Lords, and after a time, as I said, they compromised.
Yeah.
And the house was partly demolished and converted to what it is now.
Yeah.
I had already been buying and selling houses and employing labour, self-employed operatives or tradesmen. And one in particular lived in Wenniston. He was a bricklayer. And another one was in Halesworth, who was a carpenter. And I employed these along with others.
Yeah.
And we did the transformation of the house under the direction of an architect named Mrs. Gooch.
Right.
In the meantime, I was still running the Liberal tote
Yeah.
and buying and selling properties and coaching tennis in the evening sometimes.
Yeah.
Another important part of Derrick's life was being involved with the county council. This also led to him and his brother, Donald, saving the railway forever.
My brother had remained in Halesworth and was taking a part in the running of the town, and he was on the council, and during my time on with the Liberals, he had persuaded me to stand as a county council as a Liberal candidate for the county council for 7 villages south of Halesworth.
Right.
And I did this in 1964, and I was elected to the East Suffolk County Council unexpectedly, as I was what was called a cardboard candidate.
Right.
But I did a little canvassing, and I served then as county councillor for these villages for 9 years.
Yeah.
He joined me on the county council around 1967, and he was a county councillor as well.
Yeah.
And he was also on Halesworth Town Council.
Right.
But during his time as Liberal candidate, it was published in the East Anglian Daily Times that the East Suffolk County Council had agreed with the plans by a Dr. Beeching, who had been appointed to reorganise the railway system in the country.
Right.
And he had, his brief was to close unprofitable lines And this shocked my brother to think that the county council was supporting these proposals.
Yeah.
This meant there would be no railway from Ipswich to Lowestoft. And so my brother, while he was still candidate, a Liberal prospective candidate for the second election, he orchestrated a campaign with the help of Benjamin Britten, who was another user of the line,
Yeah.
and Lieutenant General Sir Ian Jacob, who lived at Woodbridge, who was Churchill's aide during the war,
Right.
supported my brother in his efforts to keep the line open.
Yeah.
And one thing he did was to organise a protest bus to run from Lowestoft to Ipswich, as it had been claimed that a bus could do the job just as well.
Yeah.
But obviously this would have severe restrictions on what could go on at frequency of running and all sorts of other disadvantages. It should be remembered that it's not just Wickham Market and Yoxford and Woodbridge who benefit, but people from the surrounding areas
Yeah.
who were using the line. They'd leave the cars, say, at Darsham.
Yeah.
People from Walberswick would perhaps catch a train at Darsham and leave their car there.
Yeah.
But how could they hope to run buses for all these people?
Yeah.
One gentleman who lived and worked in houses and had a shop there used to bring his bicycle on the train and cycle home in the evenings.
Right.
But he was just one example of.
Yeah.
And my brother was writing protest letters and got a lot of support. This effort culminated in a public inquiry in Saxmundham Town Hall,
Yeah.
when MPs were there, and my brother was main spokesman for keeping it open.
Yeah.
And in the event, he won the day, and it was through him and his efforts that there's a railway line running from Halesworth and other places on the line
Yeah.
today. He also formed what is known, he was as the East Suffolk Travellers Association,
Right.
which now has 400 members
Yeah.
and is still operating. And he did a good job there, but that wasn't sufficient to get him elected to Parliament.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, one could say he did more good outside Parliament than he would have done
Yeah.
if he'd have been MP.
Yeah.
The monthly news sheet that he produced, called the Community News, that he developed. He was a pioneer of free newspapers,
Yeah.
which he developed. He and Halesworth and District Community News now is a very popular medium. But of course all this has been knocked on the head by the coronavirus. So,
Yeah.
My activities for the Liberals finished in 1989.
Right.
When the weekly tote competition was no longer viable due to the small stakes and the arrival on the scene of the National Lottery.
Yeah.
Prior to that, if anybody had any hopes of getting suddenly rich, there was football pools.
Yeah.
Where they had to forecast 8 draws out of a list of football matches. And that was they too have now disappeared.
Yeah.
With all the other advantages and ease of betting on all sorts of things.
Yeah.
That people can have a gamble on. Not as such, in my view, a very good thing.
Yeah.
A massive part of Derrick's life was taken up with sport. This included tennis, darts and bowls.
I played tennis until I was 73, and at which time I was still playing once or twice a week, but I was hitting against the wind, playing winter and summer, and broke 2 ligaments in my arm, which finished me as a tennis player.
Right.
So I could no longer lift and wield a racket.
Yeah.
During my time immediately after the war, I used to use Halesworth Social Club, and my friends Peter Barber and some more played snooker there, as that was the only place there were billiard tables, snooker tables.
Yeah.
And I also played darts there. I found that I was quite good at darts, but I enjoyed all games and sports competitively.
Yeah.
And I was persuaded to join the White Swan at Halesworth, the dart club. They had some very good players, and throughout the 1960s and 70s, we played regularly in the Lowestoft Widows and Orphans Darts League.
Yeah.
And I did win the singles champion over the league 1 year. But I played for them for at least 19 years, and we won the league. We were the top team for 19 years, which is a record.
That's a long time.
When you think of all in Lowestoft, Kessingland,
Yeah.
and surrounding area. We did have a very good team. But other than that, I didn't excel at any sport, but I was good enough to get in the teams.
Yeah.
And a lot of the trophies that I won were group or pairs or triples or fours or both darts.
Yeah.
And of course that was time consuming, but culminated in us winning the National British Legion Fours 2 consecutive years in 1977 and 78.
Yeah.
4 of us from the Halesworth club joined the British Legion. We were members of the British Legion, but we didn't use their club. We played at Halesworth, Swan and the Social Club.
Yeah.
I was able to catch up with long-term friend and fellow darter Dick Clarke to reminisce about their darting adventures.
That was when we played in the national finals up London for the British Legion. We won that 2 year on a trot up there. It was England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland. and we were fortunate to have 2 years running to win that. You win your county first, and then you progress to outside the county, and then again, one of the years we ended up semi-final at Bishop Stortford, just for a Sunday dinner time to play them. And then we progressed to London from there. But this particular case, it was the first time we won it. We went in a car. There was only 4 of us because it was a team of 4. And went up there, and after we won, we were coming home, and Father said to me, he said, Dick, you don't like drinking, you drive. So I said, okay. And we were on the North Circle, and we stopped at Finchley to, he treated us all to a meal because we won. And anyway, when we come back out to the car, he said, hey, here's the keys, you can drive on. So going along the North Circle, coming home, all of a sudden there was me talking away, and I looked round, and the other 3 were all asleep. So, and they probably didn't wake up till nearly Ipswich. It's been part of my life, really, for a long while on the darts team, because we were always a successful dart team, so we were playing not just once a week. We were always progressing, because I suppose we were in the top 8 of Suffolk as a club, as a team as well. You know, so we were always successful as a dart team. I mean, when I joined, we didn't lose a league title for 19 years.
Wow.
And before I joined, they were winning before that. So, you know, we were playing the county finals at Sutton near Ely.
Right.
And he'd had this brand new car that was only 2 weeks old. And we stopped and had food at a pub, and then progressed to Sutton. And as we got along the road, there was a slight bend coming up, and this man come round and clipped Derek's car. And it was only 2 weeks old. Well, he was in a rage over that, obviously. So all of a sudden we turned round and chased this man, because he weren't going very hard. And anyway, when we caught up with him, Derek got in front of him and stopped him. He said, "You never hit my car," type thing, you know. And he said, "Well, did I?" Well, obviously the man was at worse for wear with drink. And apparently he didn't have any problems insurance-wise, you know, the man admitted, because there was 4 of us in the car. Yeah. And apparently he was an antiques dealer, I believe, if I remember correctly. And that was, he wasn't amused over that incident.
Derek then went on to play bowls, where he was very successful within his club and county.
I had to finish tennis, as I've said, but I was playing private tennis until at the time I broke the ligaments in my arm. My brother, in the meantime, had bought a bowls magazine to add to his other publications.
Yeah.
And he soon became engrossed in bowls and his magazine, developing it. It was a national publication, came out every month.
Right.
Called Bowls England.
Yeah.
And he had joined the Houser Club, and he had persuaded me. He couldn't persuade my wife, because she, although she liked a game of darts, she didn't, and tennis of course, she didn't want to play bowls.
Yeah.
In 1985, my friend Peter Barber and 2 or 3 more of us joined the Bowls Club. And it wasn't long before I became secretary in the following year.
Yeah.
Which I did for 6 years. During this time I travelled a lot. I played indoor bowls at Southwold, and I played for Halesworth. At the time I didn't join the Wenniston Club, as they were playing on the Vicarage Green, which was a very small one and bumpy and quite inferior. You could never rely on it, and you had to go through the vicarage garden to get to the green.
Yeah.
And so I didn't bother with Wednesday. We were playing in 7 or 8 leagues, matches every night of the week, and we had a match secretary as well as myself as general secretary.
Yeah.
And I did that. During that time I played for the county vice presidents, and later, during this time I was invited to go on a bowls tour with the president of Suffolk to Scotland, and that was the start of me being involved with county bowls.
Yeah.
And I was invited to be nominated for president, and that was the beginning of me having 4 years at the top table of Suffolk Bowls.
Yeah.
And eventually I actually became the president in 1994, and it was the president's preference as to where a weekly bowls tour went.
Right.
And I took mine to Cumbria, and we put up at hotels. We always had 28, 30 members, and all male.
Yeah.
And this was all pre-arranged by the secretaries, that we had a different match every day of the week, and different speeches to be made at every match. After the match, in the meal, he always had a meal afterwards. And so I carried on playing bowls until I could no longer. I had a serious heart attack in 2001. I had a serious heart attack. I think it was 2001.
Yeah.
And that night, my bowls bag had felt very heavy, and I was living alone. And fortunately, I rang my cousin's daughter and her sister, and they got me to hospital, where I spent 13 nights.
Wow.
With a heart attack. But I had to give up bowls when I could no longer get them up.
Yeah.
As the saying goes. Yeah.
Did you ever cross him on the bowls scene?
Not when he was playing, because I didn't play till later on when I'd finished cricket. So I didn't. I only come across him when he was president of Halesworth.
Right.
That was the only time, and we'd always speak, before the game or after the game, because he'd always be there as a spectator. And so, yeah, from the playing side, no, I didn't.
I caught up with another of Derrick's friends, Nigel Roberts, to talk about bowls.
Well, my first recollections of Derrick, I started bowls, playing bowls for the Halesworth Angel Bowls Club in the early 80s. And Derrick, realistically, was really my mentor. He got me very interested in the county and national side of bowls. He'd been a previous county president as well. And my early recollections really were the first game that I played in, which was against Wiltshire, where I won the glasses, and he very kindly sorted me out a county tie and a green blazer, the full works. But in real terms, I owe most of what I've achieved in bowls to this date down to Derrick. I've been very fortunate to have won county titles and played in national finals. But since then, as I say, Derek has been very instrumental in what I've achieved with bowls. I've always found he's a very interesting man to talk to anyway, and his knowledge of bowls has been tremendous, and he's passed that on to me.
So you're following in his footsteps, really, with the county. You're going for president.
Yes, very much so. I've been linked with the county executive now for probably in excess of 20 years. They would like me to go down the presidential route, but it's all about the right circumstances to do that. But I have been the area representative on initially EBA, English Bowling Association, and now Bowls England, and I'm still a current member on the executive. And obviously from Derek's day, things have moved on tremendously. Some for the better, some possibly a little bit more questionable, but at the end of the day, Derek was very, very broad-minded, and for the sake of promoting the game, he had some tremendous ideas which, to be fair, have now been taken on board and continue to be used on a regular basis.
In 1991, Derek sadly lost his wife to cancer.
In November 1990, we were at breakfast one morning, and my wife said she thought she had a hiatus hernia as she pressed to her tummy.
Right.
And she continued to endure this until the day after Boxing Day that year. We had our 40th wedding anniversary in the December, where we had 20 or 30 friends and relatives to a lunch at Halesworth Golf Club. But on the morning after Boxing Day, she rang the surgery at Halesworth, and that was the start of the diagnosis of illness, which it transpired was cancer of the pancreas. After treatment at Ipswich, she was sent home, and I nursed her, and she was nursed here with the help of district nurses until the 23rd of March, when she died here.
After his wife's death, Derek was asked to play bridge by one of his tennis teammates.
After my wife died, I continued playing tennis on the private court of Hazel Ellis at Cheddiston. And it was after we came off the court one morning and I'd been widowed, she asked me how I was getting on, and she said, "Do you play bridge?" And I said, "No, it's a game I always wanted to play, but I never had the chance." She said, "Well, would you like to play?" So I said yes. So to cut a long story short, she invited me with 3 others to her home.
Right.
And that was the commencement of another interest, a very absorbing one at that. And of course, another time-consuming, but it's a fascinating game, particularly for one who has played cards,
Yeah.
which I had at whist drives and nap and crib at the social club and so on. And so I then became immersed in bridge every time I could join a four or get together with 3 other people
Yeah.
by inviting them to my home and going to theirs. And then I was invited to join clubs. First club I joined was Bungay Golf Club, bridge section, on the winter nights. And eventually we started a club in Wenniston and went to Holton, and then it moved to Walberswick where it still is. And
Yeah.
I also played a club in Dayston and Halston. So this occupied me 3 afternoons a week at clubs, and I'm still immersed and fascinated with them. But of course the coronavirus has knocked all that on the head.
Yeah.
Bridge is a game that you can play for money or play for prestige. At clubs, you play for prestige or to win or lose.
Yeah.
But it doesn't cost you anything other than a table fee, which is worth the money every week.
Yeah.
And but people can play for huge stakes, but club bridge, where you all play the same cards, at first I was baffled as to how this could take place, but I was soon shown that actually a hand is dealt and then put in a board which is passed round and recorded,
Yeah.
which is how we all play the same hands, and we see who the winners are at the end of it. But I made no end of new friends playing bridge, and had been having bridge gatherings or parties every New Year's Eve here,
Yeah.
with either 11 or in multiples of 4, 3 tables or 2 tables, 8 or 12 people.
Yeah.
But we're all now in limbo, very much in limbo. Some are playing online, but I can't bring myself. I need better hearing,
Yeah.
because although it's silent in a way, I was told I should have my sound on, but I can't play online.
No.
I have to say the one that springs very much to mind, because as everybody knows, Derek is a bridge player. We went on a trip to Braintree, to Towerlands to play in a President's match, and it was touch and go who was going to sit in the front with him in the Merc, because it was all about getting the conversation going about bridge. I was very fortunate. I sat in the back and we put Terry Smith in the front, and my recollection of the whole trip there and back was Terry Smith nodding off, and every time he did nod off we kept sort of prompting him to ask Derek more questions about bridge. Nobody in the car, apart from Derek, I hasten to add, played bridge, but Terry Smith by the end of the journey could have been a professional, there's no doubt about it. And strangely, he's never picked up a pack of cards since.
Along with bridge until the coronavirus, Derek had kept occupied writing his books and writing pieces for the local newspapers, including funeral reports of local people who pass away.
In 1999, Sidney Rayner, who is photographed with us in my book, and a member of Hales Town Football Club's successful team, died, and I thought it was time something was said about some of the Halesworth people who were dying, as there was nobody else doing that. So as a sort of hobby, I started to send in reports to the community news of the funerals of people who were dying, residents of Halesworth. Send in a report of residents of, of Halesworth. After that, I did more and more, and I kept all the service sheets that came with the event, and I find I got over 160, which means that I've attended and reported close on 100, 150, 160.
That's a lot of funerals.
And that's a lot of funerals and a lot of reports.
Yeah.
I did this as a labour of love and to keep myself occupied and in touch with what were left of my friends.
Yeah. So overall, have you enjoyed your life and what you've accomplished?
I have definitely enjoyed my life and what I've accomplished. But unfortunately, I realise that it's not going to last, and none of us are immortal.
Yeah.
I'm approaching my 96th birthday in a few weeks, and anything can happen
Yeah.
at this time. But I'm not pessimistic about it,
No.
and I'm thankful, very thankful. I've got ideas about why I've sort of lived to this age, but I can't quote my opinions without causing others to disagree with me.
Yeah.
All I can say is keep smiling. And I will quote you a little piece that I used to put sometimes at the bottom of my circulars to my children when I was teaching tennis.
Yeah.
It goes like this. Lord, in the battle that goes on through life, all I ask is a field that is fair, a chance with the others to take part in the strife, with a will to do and to dare. And if I should win, let it be to the code, with my head and my honour held high. And if I lose, let me stand by the road and cheer as the winner goes by.
It's only in the last few years since my retirement that I've had the opportunity to spend more time with him. I really enjoy listening to the tales and advice that he likes to share. His mind is as sharp as ever and his memory is incredible, something that ran through the Newby family, unfortunately missing me out. If you have read his book, The Life and Times of Derek Newby, you will know he has had an extraordinary life and has touched many lives through the services that he has given to his family, the community, and to many individuals along the way. And I feel honoured and privileged to be able to call him my uncle. Lionel Halls, Derek's nephew. So if you could sum Derek up in a few sentences, what would you say about him?
From my point of view, one of the most interesting men that I've ever met. He's been extremely influential in my bowling career to this point in time, and he is still interested, which is brilliant, in what everybody does. And quite frankly, I don't think, well, I think we've been very fortunate to, one, have known him, from my point of view, very much so, and I think, you know, his legacy on the bowls side of things will, you know, continue on.
I just liked him as a person. He was always, though I was that much younger, he never treated me as being a kid. Yeah. You know, I was always approached as an adult, even though I wasn't as such. Yeah, I've always got fond memories of him.